Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Secrets of the Blind Palace, written by Tal Aviezer for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to Platinum patrons Andrew, Brian, Richard, Joe, and Will, and Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, David, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, aka Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, and Alxi. Thank you all very much for your support. Secrets of the Blind Palace is a haunted mansion adventure. I have previously run a haunted mansion adventure, The Haunt, and it was really, really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I think that's a really neat thematic dungeon to explore, especially for one-shots and obviously for Halloween time. And if we were anywhere near October, I would definitely be saving this review for to try to tie that into a more horror-themed month. But it is April right now, so I'm not going to put off doing this review because it's a really good adventure. It is designed for parties of 3rd level. It has the adjustments for stronger or weaker parties, which is always really nice to see. So technically you could go, I think, as low as 1st level and as high as maybe 4th level. I think 5th level you'd start probably getting into problems because that's a big jump up in the party level power. But the adjustments are there, and it would be really hard for 1st level as well, just because 1st level sucks. This is a really fun adventure. I like it a lot. It's a really great mixture of exploration, role-playing, and combat. A really, really fun character plot hook to get the party involved. It gives them an NPC, which is intimately tied to the adventure, and it just has a lot of really neat stuff going on throughout. It seems pretty short, which I like. Probably not quite a one-shot adventure, but all of it takes place in the haunted mansion. So it's a single dungeon crawl. It's kind of a medium-sized dungeon, I would describe it as, and it's basically the whole thing is there. Like the beginning is right before, and then the end is kind of right outside. But it is basically just all in this haunted mansion, which seems like a really easy thing to run, especially because the maps are provided. All of these factors make me really excited to actually maybe even run this adventure, possibly as a separate kind of one-shot style adventure with different characters. But let's jump into it so we can take a look at Secrets of the Blind Palace. It is divided into 5 parts, and part 1 is the adventure background, where we learn a former adventuring party, and Tomb of Annihilation does this too, which I think is really fun. It uses the plot conceit of a former adventuring party having gone through the motions of the at least part of the adventure, and then the party gets to discover kind of what befell that party. So in that case, it was the Company of the Yellow Banner, and you really don't find out what happened to them until way later in the campaign. You find all their bodies in the Tomb of the Nine Gods. But here, it is the party of Wilhelm Von Croft, this young nobleman who had dreams of plunder and went over to Bright Blossom, which was they call it a pleasure retreat, which to me sounds like a brothel, but it was really just like a resort, basically. Is more what I was picturing. Just it's got a library and some baths and just an observatory and a dining hall. It just seemed like a really fun place to hang out, basically. It's a resort, like a nice little hotel. That unfortunately fell to ruin. A night hag insinuated herself, as hags do, and brought horrible, horrible things to happen to the place. So now it's just a big fucked up mess, and has now been a haunted dungeon. And this young nobleman decided to go with his adventuring party to assault this place, which is now called the Blind Palace, and attempt to loot it for its riches, and things went horribly wrong, as they often do. Most of them were killed except for their bard, who was named Catherine Chamber. She was able to escape, but she was captured by Wilhelm's noble parents. And the parents have now set up a call for adventurers to go and essentially bring their son back. They actually hand you a scroll of raised dead to raise their son back to the living, and they'll pay you a very good sum. Now, the interesting thing here is that the fact that Catherine Chamber is alive, but she is completely mute. She cannot speak. And you will learn eventually that she actually inadvertently caused the death of Wilhelm when it was just down to those two, and he was very much obsessed about just going deeper into this dungeon. She was like, fuck off, and cast a spell that caused him to die. That was not her intent, but it happened. So she's worried about being blamed for that. The night hag that runs the place then offered her, took her voice and then said, hey, if you want your voice back, you've got to bring more people to the dungeon. So it's fun the way that these plot threads intertwine, because the parents are hiring the party to go, and then they have actually captured Catherine as the last surviving member, but obviously she can't talk and explain what happened. So there's a really interesting dynamic here where the party is tasked to go to this dungeon, and they also have this untrustworthy NPC party member with them. And it's the interesting thing is they can really choose, and Catherine herself in the notes explain the fact that her attitude toward the party should reflect how the party is treating her ultimately. So if they if she finds them to be trustworthy and good people, then she will probably end up revealing what happened and try to get on their good side and ultimately dissuade them from resurrecting Wilhelm at the end, because he is going to immediately point his finger at her, saying, you know, she's the one that caused me to die, which isn't untruthful, but that will cause problems for her. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic. I really love that you get to put this NPC with the party who has just a really complex, very cleverly interwoven story, but she is mute throughout. Now, she is a bard, and there's a really clever use of the minor illusion cantrip, and she can use that to communicate with the party by, you know, she can obviously just write words, I guess, but also she could do things like a skull symbol when she knows there's going to be danger around, or various basically play charades with the party, magical charades, and that's amazing. What a cool freaking use of minor illusion. So I really, automatically, I already love the start of this adventure and how that's used, and that the fact that this character and her decisions can actually change throughout the party. This is a great way, and you always have to be leery about adding DM-controlled NPCs to any party, and you don't obviously want them to take over, but I think it a lot of times can be a really nice thing to add to an adventure, because that is a through line for the party throughout the adventure, and in this case it works exceedingly well. And the fact that she can't really talk, and in fact when the noble parents hand her over, she's literally been like beaten by them, and she is manacled, and it's up to the party to even decide if they want to free her and like arm her and have her be a helpful party member, or they can keep her in manacles because they justifiably don't trust her. So it's just, that is a really, really interesting hook, and I love that a lot. And then there's multiple hooks here to determine why the characters were contacted by these parents. It can just be like, well, you know, they just got a message, you know, out to them saying, hey, well, we're willing to pay money for adventurers to go do this, or maybe they know the parents for some reason, or they know them through other acquaintances or something. So there's a couple different hooks labeled here, but that is the part one is everything I just described. That's them just learning about it. They are only like a mile away from the courtyard. They are given, interestingly, a time limit. They're given 24 hours to raise their son from the dead, because apparently that's the limit they have to for the raise dead spell to work in order to restore him completely back to normal, which I'm not familiar with how raise dead, resurrection, all that stuff works in D&D, but that's the time limit that you're given here, which means you are limited. Usually in a dungeon, you're limited by the fact that, you know, there's roaming monsters or random patrols in terms of rests. But here, you're limited because of the actual time limit. It even mentions you should keep track of the fact that short rests take an hour and long rests take 8 hours. And there's even one particular event in this dungeon that can make that's insidious because it has time elapsed, and that can cause more problems. So you can actually run into an issue on that. So I think it would be fun for you to keep track, although maybe you don't have to keep track very strictly. We are given maps for all of these dungeon levels, which is good. I think they are good maps. However, there's no color, and that is a big bummer. Everything is black and white here, and I was even wondering, well, maybe It's just because all of this is kind of black and white. But we do get separate player maps, which is great. Thumbs up for that. I can use that. But no color makes me, a sad boy, to use the Shining reference. It's a shame. I think it's a really well done map too. It's really good looking. It's got some nice detail on it. This is just the courtyard, by the way. There's multiple maps as we look through this adventure, but having no color is a bit of a bummer. And the entire layout and presentation is probably the weakest part of this entire adventure. You can see it's just white, black text on white paper, and even the sidebars kind of look very plain. And I even went back and looked at the designer's earlier adventure that I reviewed, and it wasn't like this. It had the nice, like, kind of, sepia tone, whatever people use for that kind of parchment paper. Obviously this kind of thing would work for a printer-friendly version, but as far as I'm aware, this is the only version that's on the DM's Guild. So it's a shame that it's just kind of this very plain. And this is partly that the DM's Guild, the level has just kind of steadily increased. Like, the presentation that everybody's been using has been really, really well done in terms of the fonts and the styles and the paper and everything looking really professional and nice. So when you go back and look at something that doesn't have all that, it's really starting to be noticeable. I don't think it takes away, obviously, from any of the written material, and it's still fantastic, but it is, presentation is a factor in your DM's Guild product, so I will say that. So thumbs up on the maps, but thumbs down on no color. It breaks it down area by area, obviously, as dungeon crawls do. Outside there is I'm just going to kind of go back to the map, it'll be easier. There's a Carrion Crawler, which is just a simple combat encounter out in the wagon carriage house. You can find the remnants of the campsite that the original adventurers went through, and this is when you start kind of doing the investigative part of the adventure, which is really neat. There's actually a well that you can drop down into and end up in a different area in the dungeon, which is very interesting if players want to dare, venturing down into a dark well, and then they come up into the bathhouse, which is actually the more dangerous entrance to go in rather than the front entrance. Like, you think this would be a clever side entrance, but you actually appear, you come up, and then that bathhouse, there's a bunch of zombies in there, and they will attack you pretty much immediately. So it's kind of a bit of a dangerous entrance, but it's interesting that it is there. And the layout of the entire adventure, I do like this handout, which looks really nice, is designed to be tackled in any order, which is kind of fun and I think really interesting. And that's the part that lends itself to being a nice, the multiple pillars of D&D, which is role-playing, combat, and exploration. The exploration part is served really well here by allowing the players to just explore whatever rooms they want. Now, obviously, the back end is locked until, I believe they have to either acquire a key from the bathhouse zombie, or maybe they can just pick the lock. But eventually they have to make their way to the dining hall and then the back ballroom area back here. But this is the primary. It's a shame that it's kind of small like this, too. I don't know if you can see very well. I didn't set it up where you can see. I do have. There are separate player maps for that don't have the numbers on them, so you could just use those. But the entrance here has a really fun moment where you can talk to the, I don't know what it's called. Let's see, where's area 6? The porter. The porter's office has a ghast, which is just a stronger ghoul, and he's just sitting there, it's all decayed and everything, and he asks, welcome to Bright Hollow, and of course his thing is he doesn't know he's dead, or he doesn't know the whole thing is destroyed and messed up, and I love those kind of encounters, when you can have, when you can use monsters in really fun, inventive ways, and especially if that incurs fun opportunities for the players to role play, and in this case it does. The players can basically convince this cadaver that they were invited. They can find an invitation later in the dungeon, and in fact, what's interesting is they can skip this room. It's just a closed door. They don't actually have to go in here. But if they go in and talk to the guy, they can get keys to various areas instead of having to use some kind of lockpicking skill. So that's a really nice option. And something that really annoys me is whenever I see like a main door be locked, what do you do if they don't have, that pick lock thing? Well, in this case, they can just talk to him and then get the keys. And then at the if they talk to him and they still fail whatever persuasion check they need, or they don't have the invitation card they find later, don't have any of that stuff, then he rings a bell, summons a bunch of skeletons, the guards, and then they all attack. So at the very least, you can still gain the keys. You'll just have to fight everybody. And then Area 7 is where you'll find all the guards slumped over, and they're all in the middle of killing each other, which is apparently what happened here as the hag made them all turn on each other. But the skeletons will still animate and attack. There's a dark mantle in the destroyed observatory room to the right. In the library to the left, there is a ghost on the third floor, which this area doesn't really need to be 3 floors. And in something like Roll20, that would kind of be annoying to shift different tokens around. But I guess I can see that it makes it a little... when you get to the 3rd floor specifically, this ghost will warn you not to touch anything silently. And if you speak to him, he explains that he's trying to protect the library from the rest of the evil, and in fact, the library does look a little better. And he offers actually a bonus side quest that the players can engage in, and he will give them a magical reward of a choice, which is literally video game style, where you can choose your reward of either a spell book or a bunch of cleric scrolls, or his glasses of minute seeing, which is really neat. And you'll find these books he's looking for in like the other 3 main areas of the dungeon that require, I believe, a little bit of searching to get it. But I think that's a really, really fun extra thing. I don't see that very often, is you can gain a side quest within the dungeon itself. So that's a really, really neat thing. Of course, you can also just opt to attack the ghost, but ghosts are pretty strong, as I recall, especially for 3rd level characters. And when he possesses somebody, he literally just marches them back down the library, so he just doesn't want them to screw with the library at all. But that's a really neat thing. The aviary and the music room, I'll do the aviary. It's got so one of the former adventuring parties had died there. It is actually missing its eyes. Oh, that's what I forgot. There's a really fun part. When you first walk into the main entrance, on the chandelier, there are a bunch of nasty fetishes hanging from the chandelier, and each one points to one of Catherine's and Wilhelm's adventuring party. And the 3 of them died, which is a halfling cleric, a tiefling sorcerer, I think, and Wilhelm himself. And then Catherine has not yet died, obviously, but she was still part of this party. And all 4 of them have objects of theirs like hanging from the thing. And the object of the halfling is like his eyeballs in a bloody sack, and it's like blood dripping down. That's such a great, evocative image. I love it. They will find this eyeless halfling in this aviary, which is a really cool trap. It's got that classic kind of Indiana Jones. It's an object that you really want. It's like a magical moonstone egg. And if you try to take it, then all these skeletal birds come to life and attack, and it's done as if by the Spirit Guardian spell, unless you're in this rug in the middle room, and that's where the halfling ended up dying because he couldn't leave the area, dying of dehydration. And then the hag came by and harvested his eyes later. In the music room, and it does mention the fact that players can and should try to steal that moonstone egg and solve the puzzle themselves, which is nice. In the music room, they will find a ghostly woman who first tries to run out and beckon them in. Inside, they will find the corpse of the tiefling sorcerer, and the trap there is that these ghosts try to get you to dance with them, and it's a really fun... I'm going to skip ahead to where it is. Right here, you can see it's a really fun performance check. I've never seen performance used in such a cool way, and literally it's broken down between, depending on what roll you make, from 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, or 20 plus. And that is fantastic. Obviously, if you do it really well, you'll get a bonus reward. If you do it okay, then you won't be subject to any penalties. If you don't do it very well, then they force you to dance, which incurs exhaustion. If you fail really badly, they force you to dance, which incurs exhaustion all the way to the point of death. What I really love is if you fail so badly, I'm just going to read this description. If you roll a 1 to 4 on your performance check, and again, these ghosts appear and force you to dance, the character dances abysmally. There are more wrong moves than right moves. The non-dancing ghost places its ethereal thumb and forefinger on its ghostly sinuses, and its head droops. The dancing ghost breaks off the dance before the song is over. You're hopeless, it pronounces. Please just go away. The doors open and unlock. Which means... you can correctly solve this puzzle by doing it so horribly wrong. That is amazingly funny. That's like a funny hidden Easter egg. Because normally, obviously, you always want to roll as well as you can with any kind of skill check. So I really think that's a clever, funny, and very thematically appropriate solution. Is the characters they dance so badly that the ghosts are like, oh, fuck off. We'll just open the doors and let you go. I think it's amazing. It's a really fun puzzle, really thematic. I love that there's both a male and female ghost, so even players can choose who they want to have as their dance partner, which is really fun. It's a really, really neat puzzle. I like it a lot. And then, let's see, the bathhouse has a bunch of zombies. It's a combat encounter. The dining room is a dialogue session with a bunch of skeletons there, and I think this is a neat twist, because normally, and in fact, as we saw in previous areas, when you see, undead skeletons sitting somewhere, what's going to happen next? Well, obviously, in every D&D universe, they're going to pop up and attack you. That happens like 9 times out of 10. Um, in this case, they're literally just they sit there and talk, which is I think really funny. There's a rotted cake in the middle. When you leave the room, one of them says, "But you didn't touch the cake." Like it's just a funny dialogue session. I think that's a really fun twist, especially after you just jacked with the players left and right. That's a really neat. At the end of the ballroom, they see the encounter that plays out. They actually see the ghostly encounter of Catherine killing Wilhelm. Again, inadvertently, she casts the Dissonant Whisper spell that causes him to flee because she's just like, oh, get away from me, you're obsessed with this, and it's already led to the death of half our party. And he ends up falling into the pit, and then the Night Hag gets him and kills him, basically. So she did kind of cause his death, although it wasn't her intent, I guess. But the players see all this as a ghostly cutscene, which I am in favor of. I've used before in my campaigns for sure. And then the players really have to decide, they kind of turn to her if she's with them. And it even mentions the fact that if she's not, then she'll appear later in the adventure. But if she is with them, and hopefully she is, because I think that enhances the adventure, then the players really have to make a choice and kind of confront her about it. And at that point, then the text in the adventure says, how does she feel about the players? Have they proven themselves to be very good and trustworthy and generally good people, or are they just kind of cold-hearted mercenaries? And that really determines like how forthcoming and truthful she is to the players. So that's all really, really fantastic. And then the finale is the actual lower half when they lower themselves into the pit. There's a really fun area here where a bunch of stone-faced statues is kind of a trapped area. I really like that they see the stone likenesses of the slain party members. So they'll see the halfling cleric, the tiefling sorcerer, and Wilhelm. And they all offer some kind of thing that happens at the end. The halfling cleric is probably the coolest because he says, like, show me that which I lusted after or whatever. And the puzzle there, again, hopefully the players went to the aviary and looked at that, was that he wanted the egg. Well, hopefully the party grabbed that egg, but the text even says, like, even if you just make a minor illusion and show the egg or a picture of the egg, that will satisfy this giant stone face. If you don't, and you try to cross the threshold between them, then these giant, like, purple tentacles come out and attack you, so that's really neat. The Tiefling Sorcerer actually just recites a poem, which is interesting, and it doesn't really have anything to do with anything, but it's just a really neat poem that the designer wrote, which is really cool and kind of speaks to the Edgar Allan Poe kind of influences of this haunted mansion, which is just really lovely. And then Wilhelm, the statue, is a helmed horror that attacks. The very finale, they find the body. There's a really creepy thing where the head and the hands have been decapitated and sewn back on, and then the Night Hag is kind of waiting in the wings here in a secret chamber. And at this point, it really is determined how Catherine feels about the party, because her initial part of her motivation was that she was supposed to lure people down in here in order to get her voice back. Now, she doesn't really want to do that. She's not really a bad person, but if the players are have been kind of cold-hearted people, then she probably will signal to the Night Hag and just have attack, and then she will just flee after she gets her voice back. Or if they've agreed to, if she sees them as good people, then she'll see like, oh, please don't raise the body because he will, there's no universe in which we both exist. He will have me killed. Or the players could agree to raise, have her, signal the Night Hag to come out and restore her voice, and then attack the Night Hag and side with her. There's all these different things that the players can do. If the players decide to raise Wilhelm, then that does occur. He will be raised and then blame Catherine, and maybe even the Night Hag doesn't even attack. The players could just ignore that aspect of it and just kind of march back out and have a confrontation with the parents who appear at the in the courtyard. Or if they don't decide to raise the body, then the Night Hag can animate the hands and the head into crawling claws and a flame skull, so that the party still gets a proper boss battle at the end. Or even a boss battle with the Night Hag herself, although hags would rather do things behind the scenes and not necessarily attack themselves. So the party would really have to kind of go after her, be more proactive about like kicking down her door and fighting her, in which case they can get more loot and she would just kind of retreat after a time into the ethereal realm. But it's a really neat climax. I love that the party has to decide how to handle this corpse at the end, if they want to raise him, and the consequences that will occur, because if they do raise him, they get a way better reward from the parents, whereas if they just bring out his dead body that's going to be decapitated now and no hands, they get way less of a reward. It's just a really interesting end, and it doesn't even end there, because the party then have to come out back into the courtyard where the parents are there, and then they have to either come out, empty-handed, or or I guess they'll have the corpse at least, to show the parents, in which case they get a way less of a money payout, or they come out with Wilhelm, in which case he immediately says, we need to execute Catherine because she was the one that killed me. In which case, or maybe they killed Catherine, in which case she comes back as a revenant. Like, that's even in the text. Like, it's all so good. There's so many good options here. There's so many good opportunities for storytelling surrounding an already really fun dungeon crawl with a lot of stuff to do. I just love pretty much everything about this adventure. It's short and sweet, but it's very, very sweet. So it's just hugely recommended. I'm going to go over my quick pros and cons for Secrets of the Blind Palace. Pros: the mute bard and the mystery behind her doomed adventuring party serves as both a great plot hook and an interesting and suitably terrifying mystery to discover. As I mentioned in the beginning, that's such a fun aspect that is really neat to explore just throughout the adventure. Pros: the mansion contains a perfect balance of exploration, combat, and role-playing opportunities. Really, really great dungeon crawl. Pros: the optional events and quests that can be completed to earn rewards, or in one case, avoid a nasty trap at the end. And by that I mean getting that moonstone egg not only is a useful treasure, but can actually help solve a trap at the end. And I really like that bonus puzzle, bonus side quest the party can get from that ghost in the library, and they can just turn in those books, which is a really neat additional quest they can perform. Pro: every combat encounter has notes for adjusting for stronger or weaker parties and levels. I didn't really go over that too much, and I've seen this used before in several other adventures, and it's always a positive. Anytime there's a combat encounter, there we go, you can see like very weak, weak, strong, and very strong. So that is usually it can be adjusting hit points, or usually changing an entire stat block. For example, for the porter, you can change him to be a ghast to a ghoul, or for very strong, you can actually upgrade him to a wight without changing the basic flow of the combat. So thankfully there's enough creatures in the monster manual. I also love that all the creatures are bolded, and they have clearly annotated where to find that creature. Thank you so much for doing that. Monster Manual 148. That's amazing. I want every adventure to do that from now on. Pro: meaningful choices at the end with multiple layers and outcomes. A very, very satisfying ending that can really change depending on how the players have treated certain NPCs and how they feel about just how things should end up. My only cons are the actual layout. It's just that plain white paper layout that looks kind of blah. And the maps themselves, while I do like the actual map design, there's just no color, which is a bummer. Final verdict: Secrets of the Blind Palace is a fantastic haunted mansion adventure with a compelling hook, interesting NPCs, and memorable events. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. And you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.